Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another episode of our series of ranking every division in the NFL. And today I am starting with the NFC North. So obviously I'm going to get straight into it. My number 4 is the Chicago Bears. I didn't like what they did in the draft, taking Cole Kmet, who obviously was probably arguably the best tight end in the draft, but still you got rid of Trey Burton, which was fair enough. But you have like you brought in Jimmy Graham in free agency, you have Demetrius Harris, you have JP Holds, Adam Shaheen, you have so many stuff there. Like you have 9 tight ends altogether. So it made absolutely no sense to bring him in. And bringing Jalen Johnson I love because if he's healthy he could arguably be the best. He could turn out to be the best quarterback in the draft, especially next season on this defense with the likes of Kyle Fuller, Buster Skrine, Eddie Jackson. Like they have so much there anyway. And obviously their front 7 is still Khalil Mack, Danny Trevathan, Robertson Harris, Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman, Roquan Smith. They brought in Robert Quinn from the Rams, from Dallas. Sorry, Dallas last season, the Cowboys. So hopefully their defense would probably go back to where they were. They were good last year, but they were dominant the year before. So hopefully they can get back to there. But still, their offensive line is terrible. They didn't address that whatsoever. They didn't lose it much because they got rid of Leonard Floyd and Clinton Dix has gone, Bryce Callan. They lost all these guys last year and they were still alright, but you still have Trubisky behind center and you brought in Nick Foles. Neither of guys, obviously Nick Foles won a Super Bowl, but he signed that massive contract last year with the Jaguars, so trading for him doesn't make a lot of sense when realistically they probably should have tried to trade up, or even they could have taken a chance on the likes of Jalen Hurts or a Jordan Love before. They should have got into the first round a bit more than what they did. So like they didn't address what they needed. Obviously they have Allen Robinson, one of the most underrated wide receivers in my opinion in the NFL. You brought in Cordell Patterson, who can give you some more options in the offense like they were 2 years ago when Nagy was able to get them doing more and being a bit more creative offensively, using the likes of Tariq Cohen and having Jordan Howard there. But you have Anthony Miller and Calvin Ridley, who need to kind of live up to their hype again, because again a lot of this team did well 2 years ago and then fell off last year, obviously because of how finicky and how bad Mitchell Trubisky was coming off the year he had before. So I think they should have addressed their offensive line definitely, and they should have addressed their quarterback, because Nick Foles is not your quarterback for the future. So they could prove me wrong. That defense could prove me wrong more than anything, or Trubisky could have a bounce back season, or Nick Foles. Like they have way too many ifs for me to put them any higher. So my number 2 is the Detroit Lions, because like my 3 and 4 can definitely be kind of swapped back and forth, because they've both been underwhelming in comparison to what you think they do or what you'd hope they do, because they keep trying to get better, but mostly the Bears. But like the Lions I have 3rd because they were a Matthew Stafford away from being good last year, and I don't like Matt Patricia being there, but the team he has in there I do like, because he brought in their offensive line in front of Matthew Stafford isn't that bad, and especially when you have Ragnow and you brought in Vaitai. I'm not going to try to say his first name. I will for the fun of it. Alapula Vaitai. Not even close. They brought him in, and they already had Taylor Decker, and then you have the likes of Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones. You drafted TJ Hawkinson last year. You have Kerryon Johnson. You have Danny Amendola. You drafted DeAndre Swift this season. Like their offense is kind of stacked when you think about it, and it's just getting Matthew Stafford, because Matthew Stafford is still a good quarterback. He just has so many injury issues, and he just can't seem to win in the playoffs if he gets there. But like they're so close to being good, and like last year they didn't get blown out in a lot of games. Like when you watched them last season, they were still in games even though they lost those games. And their defense, I think, got a lot better where it needed to be. Like obviously you traded away Quandre Diggs last year, and in the offseason you traded away Darius Slay, but you did draft arguably the best and most NFL ready corner in Jeff Okudah, who could arguably be as good. He's not as athletic and kind of as aggressive as Darius Slay was, but he's still going to step in and be your number 1 corner probably straight away, because on the other side he only has he brought in Desmond Trufant in free agency, who's good, but still you drafted Junior Quara to join his brother, who I think He's probably better and definitely has a higher upside than his brother Romeo. And you need that extra speed off the side, because Trey Flowers went from almost an all-pro defensive end in New England to not really being that, because their defensive line wasn't healthy enough for him to succeed. But you bring in Danny Shelton from the Patriots. You brought in Jamie Collins from the Patriots, was definitely what they needed they definitely needed that kind of a more versatile linebacker, because they don't have that anywhere when you look across their line. Like Deshaun Hand I like up front, but you already have Trey Flowers on that side of the defensive line, so they're close. And you brought in Duran Harmon who can play nickel the odd time and come up as a rush linebacker. So like they've done a lot to get better, but I still think Matt Patricia's in their way, and I think if he doesn't get it to work this season, he could probably be looking for a new job. My number 2 is the Green Bay Packers. Now 1 and 2 can be swapped, but they definitely are probably miles ahead of 3 and 4, which could also be swapped. Like the NFC North is very a 2-horse race, but both horses can be swapped, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Saying it out loud didn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, Packers, because they didn't draft what Aaron Rodgers needed. Like you have Devontae Adams, which is a top 5 for me, probably a top 5 wide receiver in the league. You have Alan Lazard, who I really like. You have Scantling, who's probably his defining year now if he gets a job next year after this, because he needs to perform. But you needed to bring in, you left Jimmy Graham walk, and you brought in Mercedes Lewis, who's probably just going to be a blocking tight end because he's up there in age. Doesn't have his speed, he's safe hands, so he can be used, but he's definitely not a so-called weapon for Aaron Rodgers to have. And you have Aaron Jones, but then you drafted AJ Dillon. When Aaron Jones, you already have Jamal Williams behind Aaron Jones, so you don't need to bring in AJ Dillon. As much as I love him being a Boston College fan, he's not going to get many carries. It's not the situation you wanted him to land, or for either team really. And then obviously you brought in Jordan Love, which was, I understand it to a point, but I'm pretty sure they traded up to get Jordan Love in the first round when you already had Aaron Rodgers. And I understand trying to go forward, because obviously the likes of Tim Boyle is not going to be your future quarterback, but you didn't need that this year per se. You probably could have picked someone up in free agency, like Cam Newton's in free agency. Why not have him as a backup quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers if Aaron Rodgers gets injured, or if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play through an injury, rare as well. So like bringing Jordan Love is, I understand going forward, but if Rodgers probably still has another 2 or 3 years of decent production ahead of him, when you could have brought in wide receiver. I'm pretty sure Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson were both on the board at that stage. Why not bring in a Justin Jefferson to give him another weapon? I could be wrong, just going off the top of my head if I remember correctly where the numbers were. Why not bring him in? So like, why not get Aaron Rodgers the weapons he needs to get better? Like their defense is still good. Like they have, like last season bringing in the likes of Za'Darius and Preston Smith, like brought as bad as they were stopping the run last year. Their pass rush was still up there, and also you have Jair Alexander, you have Darnell Savage, you have Traymon Williams. Like you have so many good guys back there. They brought in Christian Kirksey to replace Blake Martinez in the linebacker core, which is definitely a great swap, because you needed Blake Martinez is obviously a tackle machine. He's a 100-year tackle kind of guy and a leader in that defense. But Christian Kirksey's a couple years younger. They got him cheaper. Like I think their defense is good enough, but their offense, like his offensive line is fine. They let Brian Bulaga walk, but they brought in Rick Wagner, a tackle. They brought him in. So like for what you lost, you made up for it, but not in the case of you're not taking advantage of the last years of Aaron Rodgers. So that's why they're my number 2 right now. But like I said, they could easily be the number 1 division. Wouldn't be that crazy to think of that. But my number 1 is going to be, even though they lost, arguably, you could argue their best wide receiver, you could throw between him and Adam Thielen, is obviously the Minnesota Vikings. My number 1. I think if you trade away they lost a lot. Like they lost Everson Griffin, who obviously is getting up in age, but still he was productive enough. You lost Stephon Diggs, obviously you traded away, but they traded first round pick, so it worked out pretty well. You got rid of Xavier Rhodes, is gone, who obviously struggled, but that's still another hole. you got rid of Linval Joseph. Now they brought in, like I said, they drafted Justin Jefferson, who could arguably step in and be as productive as Stephon Diggs would have been this year. And you drafted Jeff Gladney, who could be that number one corner that you need, because you lost, losing Xavier Rhodes, you also lost Trey Waynes. So like they have a lot of holes there, but obviously still have to need Hunter up front. You still have Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. You re-signed Anthony Harris, or you franchise tagged Anthony Harris. You still have Harrison Smith. So like their offense is still, you have Dalvin Cook, who finally had a somewhat healthy year last year and looked like a top 5 running back in the league, like we thought he could be. So like, and our offensive line is still decent enough. This team for me has the most offensive firepower and a decent enough back 7 on their defense that they can still win a load of games. And you have Kirk Cousins behind, who doesn't have the locker room problems that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to have with Jordan Love, looking over his shoulder all the time, like, is this guy trying to take my job the same way I did to Brett Favre? It obviously won't happen straight away, because it's still Aaron Rodgers' team. But like, when you look at the likes of what his situation is compared to, and you still have Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith in Minnesota first of all, so Kirk Cousins still has a lot of weapons in there. So that's why I think they're in a more stable situation compared to what the Packers are in, especially with Aaron Rodgers and what way he's going. It kind of depends on him really and how he feels, because he's been done over really in the off season. So yeah, my number 4 going back over is going to be Trubisky, Foles and the Chicago Bears. My number 3 is going to be Stafford and the Lions. My number 2 is Rodgers and his depleted offense in Green Bay. And number 1 is Kirk, not primetime Cousins, and the Minnesota Vikings. So thank you again for watching. People seem to be liking these rankings, so we still have another couple divisions to go. Hit a like, subscribe if you haven't, and tune in next time for the NFC South when you see me again. So peace out.